Thank you for joining us. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena. And tonight we speak about decriminalization of petty offences, and this show is done in partnership with Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum and the Coalition to Decriminalise and Declassify Petty Offences in Uganda. I'll very quickly introduce my guests who will shed more light on what we're actually talking about. I'll start right next to me, Dr. Adrian Juko, the Executive Director, Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum. Warm welcome.
Thank you, Josephine.
All right. And right next to him, needs no introduction, I think, Avande Fredenanga, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for the invite, and welcome our viewers.
All right. And still next to him, well, the mask might hide a lot. We have Honorable Asuman Basalira, Bujiri Municipality MP. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
All right. And finally, at the very end, we have Ruth Sekindi, Director, Monitoring and Inspections at the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers.
All right. So for our conversation, because we are speaking about petty offences in Uganda, when I hear idle and disorderly, rogue and vagabond, can somebody give me examples of what that looks like? How do you determine that I am idle and disorderly or I am rogue and vagabond?
I think that's the real issue why we are here. Who is an idle person? Who is a rogue and vagabond? I don't know. Maybe the policeman will tell us, because if you look at the law, it's never clear who is an idle and disorderly person and who is a rogue and vagabond, who is doing what you call a common nuisance. So for me, I would say the major issue with these laws is their vagueness. They are vague and unclear which kind of conduct makes me idle and disorderly. For example, sitting here, does that make me idle and disorderly? If I sit at the State Square, does that make me idle and disorderly?
If there's a bench, a public bench that's placed somewhere and I'm sitting there,
I guess the law would actually catch you as being idle and disorderly, yes.
Okay. Yes, Ruth?
Just to add on what Dr. Adrian has said, the petty offences that we have in the penal code are quite a number. And like he has said, rogue and vagabond, idle and disorderly. But when you break it down, you realize that they're talking about loitering, begging, and there are issues of fouling air within the penal code. Now, what is fouling air? If you have a bad odor and you speak, I mean, if you interpret them literally, you are actually arresting people who have a bad breath.
You're going to arrest me for having bad breath?
Well, they don't call it bad breath, they call it fouling air. Having an unpleasant business.
What's an unpleasant business?
Common nuisance.
What's an unpleasant business?
Unpleasant, then when they break it down, if you make noise, if you quarrel, in public, on a street or a public place. So as Dr. Adrian has said, they're very, very ambiguous, and we still have them in our penal code. And then if you look at the KCCA Law and Order, Law Enforcement Ordinance of 2006, it goes further to have other ambiguous petty offences, where if you sell, basically it targets hawkers, it targets noisemakers in the city. Yes, we understand this. However, we realize that it targets the poor. We are criminalizing poverty. So when you talk about petty offenses, they are really, really ambiguous. What is idle and disorderly? These were colonial laws that such that if you sat next to a rich man, a rich white man's fence, then that means you cannot explain yourself. Then you're being arrested for that. You're committing a misdemeanor. You're breaking the law.
Okay.
The one I like most is the one that talks of someone looking like a reputed thief.
So you're going to look at me and I look like a thief?
A reputed thief, yes.
So then I get arrested?
If you can't give a good conduct of yourself, then you're going to get arrested. So that's so subjective. It gives the police all the powers to do anything to anyone they actually find on the street. And that's why we say it's about criminalization of poverty. It's about the poor. It's about marginalization. So if I don't like you, I'm going to arrest you for being idle and disorderly or for being rogue and vagabond.
Because I have bad breath. Honorable Basalira, what do you think about all of this?
Well, I am guilty. This discussion places me in the spotlight. I think we are partly responsible for these petty offences being still on our law books. I think as Parliament, we should have considered, scrapping them off our law books. Ruth has told you the history. These offences are contained in the Penal Code Act. It's a very old law. It has the vestiges of colonialism. And when these colonialists were here, there are so many laws they enacted for purposes of entrenching colonial rule, okay? And they made it so wide in such a manner that if you are arrested, then the police must find a charge against you, okay? Without necessarily being specific. So under our laws, you can literally be charged with anything, okay? You cannot escape. And the way they are worded is very elastic, that every almost act or omission can easily end you in a court or in a police. So it's really very unfortunate, the elastic nature of these offences, and the fact that these are colonial, from our colonial books, when we inherited them, puts Parliament in the spotlight. I think we have not done enough to help the country in addressing some of these issues.
All right. Just for context, Honorable Basalia is on the Parliament committee that is working on draft amendments, if I'm correct, to remove the idle and disorderly laws from the Penal Code. Afande Enanga, I saved you for last because you are you are really, I don't know if I should say the problem now, because you're the one actually enforcing the laws.
I think the timing of these initiatives to decriminalize some of these petty laws is right, because as we talk now, the police is part of the stakeholder team that is working with the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, together with the offices of the Attorney General and JILOS, to review a number of laws that are within the Penal Code, the Magistrates Courts Act, the Evidence Act, and also the Trials and Indictment. When you look at the areas that the Attorney General and the Ministry of Justice shared with us, there are about 153 sections that are supposed to be amended and others repealed. Now, as we talk now, the law on idle and disorderly, which repeatedly brings in rogue and vagabond, is something that we suspended following the declaration by His Excellency the President in the campaigns of 2016. So we've not been arresting persons on idle and disorderly, I think, since that time. And we are waiting for Parliament to repeal that section. It is there, but it is redundant, because we are not arresting persons on such. But the way the Honourable has indicated, these laws were an epic of the British system. They had a preventative measure, and also it also had a role on promoting public safety and security during that time. Only that they have lasted this long, they are in the books, and provided they still are present within the books, you find that there are situations which come, and you're a policing institution, a law enforcement, so you find these laws still there. You'll talk about idle and disorderly, rogue and vagabond, hawking, things like prostitution.
Ruth has given examples
so on and so forth.
of them, and I want to know, before 2016, when you were still making these arrests, what would that arrest look like? What would qualify for I am idle and disorderly?
Now, it describes itself. When you look at somebody, first of all, who is idle, we used to look at persons who posted very suspicious behavior and in form of loitering repeatedly in a place.
Okay.
You know, somebody who is, why should you loiter repeatedly? No, okay, there's the right to liberty and other freedoms that are there.
Perhaps I'm waiting
But,
for someone.
Yes, and when our officers could approach you, then your ability to explain and express yourself to show cause why you're present at that place at that time would depend on the discretion between you and the enforcement person. Then, there are people whom you would find, you know, sleeping, like when you used to have the constitutional square, city square. Guys would sleep there from morning up to evening, just doing nothing. And then in the evenings, they would migrate into posting criminal behaviors, mugging people who are going back.
Are we
so
watching these
so
people and
so
observing them? Then we come up with the conclusion?
Yes, but now that one also calls for a lot of advancement. We shouldn't be looking at some of these laws in isolation. We also should look at the other advancements in society. Does Uganda as a country have the ability to keep watch on each and every one, using probably employing technology and having, you know, the vigilance of the community? Are Ugandans that vigilant that they can keep watch over themselves and the rest of members of the public? We are not so vigilant, you know that.
All right, Dr. Juko, you conducted a study, and we're going to take a break, but in 2016, you conducted a study into the enforcement of Uganda's idle and disorderly laws and its impact on the human rights of marginalized groups in Uganda. You found that these laws were regularly enforced for purposes of keeping undesirable social groups off the street, and that persons arrested under these provisions were often arrested for such acts as walking at night, being found in a lodge or a nightclub, I don't know how that amounts to idle, having no identification, actions that should not offend any laws. Very briefly, before we take the break, can you speak to us about how the study was conducted and how you came to these conclusions?
First of all, I want to first clarify one thing that Afande Naga talked about, the issue of these arrests having stopped in 2016. That's not actually true.
I saw your...
Yes. The arrests go on up today, except what he wants to say is that what happens is they no longer charge people with being idle and disorderly. They don't.
What's the charge now?
But they charge them with being rogue and vagabond, being a common nuisance, and the new recent one, doing an act like a negligent act like to spread infection of disease. Meaning that really...
What act likely to spread disease?
Is
this COVID-19?
Putting off your mask, yes, COVID-19 is now the new normal,
okay.
yes. So since COVID-19 started, they now arrest people for doing a negligent act like to spread infection of disease. Meaning that they find you walking on the street beyond a few hours, that's the charge. They find you looking like you are suspicious, that's the charge. They love that so much these days. So our study, we looked at a number of, we examined the police stations around the country, looked at the courts and how they actually do prosecute these cases. So many cases, when people get arrested, many of them don't even make it to the prison books, the record books, the police record books. They arrest them, and then somewhere on the way, they disappear. Something happens, and I think one of the biggest things that happens is giving them kitu kidogo, what we call kitu kidogo in Uganda, bribes. The police love this, and so because they tell you, well, if you don't pay, we're going to get you in, and people fear being put in.
In fact, it has been a money-making venture for some, not all, but for some police officers. And speaking from experience as a practicing lawyer, I have found, one time I went to a court in Nyimbwa, that side of Nyimbwa, I think it's that side of Nyimbwa, there's some small court there. I found a courtroom packed with these categories of people. Now, what some police officers do, they will arrest them from Kampala here, drive them very far, okay, to distant areas. They cannot communicate with their next of kin, and then they are asked for something small to be released. It has been happening. So the earlier we really streamline these, what we call pet offences. And you see, what Afande Nanga is also shy to tell you, part of the biggest victims of this idle and disorderly rogue and vagabond are what you call prostitutes. Eh? In our local language, we beautify it and say nekolera jang, or neko. We abbreviate it as neko. Okay. When these people are found in the night, okay, they are usually arrested for being idle and disorderly.
But they're working, are they not?
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Okay? Because you see, it's they're in a dilemma at the level of law enforcement, and I want to plead for him. At the level of law enforcement, prostitution is illegal in our country, okay? But you see, if you found these people on the streets around, okay, looking at them per se, you cannot conclude that they engaged in prostitution, okay? But we all know they are doing prostitution. But you see, arresting them on account of prostitution, you'll find it extremely difficult to prove it before the courts of law. Yeah. So the easier route is to use the rogue and vagabond, is to use the idle and disorderly.
All right, thank you so much. I like that you're sitting in the middle.
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in the
and
middle.
I'm going to come to you to explain, but let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
Thank you.